When you're blamed for something you didn't do, it stings. But when the whole world, from your teacher to the cops, seems out to get you, it hits differently. Jaden could have given up, but instead he did something no one saw coming. And the way this story ends, you won't believe it. 12-year-old Jaden Walker knew two things for sure. Life in Detroit wasn't easy, and if something broke, you fixed it yourself. His dad had taught him that before life got rough, back when their garage still had a car instead of boxes full of tools and memories. Jaden had a knack for fixing things, whether it was a bike chain or a neighbor's leaky faucet. It was how he stayed busy and, honestly, how he stayed out of trouble. That afternoon, he was riding home on his patchwork bicycle, a Frankenstein of rusted parts he'd scavenged from around the neighborhood. The pedals squeaked with every push, but it worked, and that was enough. As he cruised down a quiet stretch of road, something caught his eye. A sleek, black car pulled over on the shoulder. Now, this wasn't just any car. It looked like it belonged on a red carpet, not in the middle of his neighborhood. Its glossy paint practically glowed in the sunlight, and its rims were so shiny, Jaden could probably see his reflection in them. But one of those expensive tires, totally flat. Next to the car stood a man in a suit, looking completely out of place and more than a little frustrated. He was poking at a car jack like it was some kind of alien technology. Jaden couldn't help but laugh to himself. "Hey kid," the man called out when he spotted Jaden slowing down. "You know anything about flat tires?" Jaden skidded to a stop, balancing his bike with one foot. He took a quick look at the situation and smirked. "Yeah, I got this. Give me a sec." The man hesitated, but then stepped back, clearly out of ideas. His name was Richard Weston, though Jaden didn't know that. All he saw was a guy in a fancy suit with no clue how to handle a simple flat. Weston, a billionaire tech mogul, wasn't used to asking for help, especially not from a kid on a beat-up bike. Jaden leaned his bike against a fence and got to work. His small hands moved with confidence, flipping the jack into position and loosening the lug nuts like he'd done it 100 times before. Weston watched, a mix of relief and disbelief on his face. "You're pretty good at this," Weston said, trying to make conversation. Jaden shrugged, not looking up. "I fix stuff, cars, bikes, whatever, it's just what I do." Within minutes, the new tire was on. Jaden tightened the last bolt and stepped back, brushing his hands on his jeans. "All set, you're good to go." Weston blinked. "That's it?" Jaden nodded. "Yep, just be careful on these roads." Weston reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet that probably cost more than Jaden's whole house. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, thumbing through a stack of bills. Jaden shook his head. "Nothing. It's cool." "Nothing," Weston echoed, genuinely stunned. "Are you serious?" Jaden smiled, grabbed his bike, and hopped on. "Yep. Have a good one, mister." As he pedaled away, Weston stood there, his wallet still in his hand. He watched Jaden disappear down the road, feeling oddly unsettled. Who was this kid? Why didn't he take the money? And why did Weston suddenly feel like he owed him something? Sliding back into his car, Weston started the engine and drove off. But he couldn't shake the thought of that boy. Something about him stuck. Something about this wasn't over. The next day started like any other for Jaden Walker. He dragged himself out of bed, threw on his usual hoodie and jeans, and headed to school with his backpack slung over one shoulder. The walk wasn't long, but the weight of his neighborhood always hung heavy. Cracked sidewalks, boarded-up windows, and whispers of lives that hadn't gone the way they were supposed to. But Jaden wasn't one to dwell. He had a knack for focusing on what he could fix and ignoring the rest. At school, though, trouble found him before lunchtime. Miss Hudson, his history teacher, was pacing up and down the classroom like she was on a mission. Her eyes locked onto Jaden, and for a split second, he could feel the storm coming. "Jaden," she called out, crossing her arms. "Care to explain why school supplies are missing from my desk? You were the last one near it." Jaden's heart skipped. "What? I didn't take anything, Miss Hudson. Don't even try," she cut him off, her voice sharp. "Go to the principal's office, now." The whole class stared as he grabbed his bag and headed out, his face burning. Miss Hudson had always had it out for kids like him, quick to assume the worst. Jaden clenched his fists, swallowing the frustration. Fighting back wouldn't change anything, it never did. Principal Reed wasn't any better. A quick dismissive glance and Jaden's protests fell on deaf ears. "Jaden, I don't have time for excuses," Reed said, tapping his desk. "You'll be cleaning the schoolyard after classes for the rest of the week. Maybe this will teach you some responsibility." Jaden bit his tongue, nodded, and left. By the time school ended, he was out there with a trash bag, picking up candy wrappers and crumpled papers while other kids headed home. His stomach churned with anger, but he kept moving, one piece of litter at a time. Back in his office across town, Richard Weston couldn't stop thinking about the boy who'd fixed his tire. He tried to focus on his work. Contracts, emails, and meetings stacked up. But Jaden's face kept popping into his mind. Who was this kid? Why had he turned down money without a second thought? "Richard," his assistant said, breaking his train of thought, "you've been staring at that same email for 10 minutes. He leaned back in his chair. "Remember the kid I told you about, the one who fixed my flat?" She nodded. "The one who refused your money?" "Yeah, I remember." "I can't stop thinking about him," Richard admitted. "I want to find him, thank him properly." "Well," she said, "you know the neighborhood, maybe start there?" It wasn't much to go on, but it was something. Richard made a mental note to check it out when he had the chance. Meanwhile, Jaden's day went from bad to worse. That evening, as he rode his bike home, he noticed flashing lights in his rearview mirror. A police car pulled up behind him and 2 officers stepped out. Jaden's chest tightened as they approached. "Hey kid," one officer said, his tone flat. "We got a report about a suspect matching your description. Step off the bike." Jaden froze. "I didn't do anything. Just step off the bike," the officer repeated. Jaden obeyed, his pulse racing. They patted him down, checked his bag, and searched his bike, all while neighbors peeked through curtains and whispered from their porches. His throat burned with the effort of holding back tears. It wasn't fair, but fairness didn't seem to matter here. After what felt like forever, one of the officers sighed. "Looks like we got the wrong guy. You can go." Jaden didn't even respond. He grabbed his bike and pedaled away, his legs shaking with every push. When he got home, he didn't say a word to his dad. He just went to his room and sat on his bed, staring at the wall. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it didn't hurt any less. The world felt heavy, like no matter how hard he tried, it was always ready to push back. But Jaden wasn't the kind of kid to stay down for long. He'd fix this somehow. That's just what he did. The next morning, Richard Weston leaned back in the plush leather seat of his car, gazing out the tinted window. His assistant had tracked down a lead. The boy he couldn't stop thinking about, Jaden, had been spotted near an old garage just a few miles from where they'd first met. Something about that kid had stuck with him. His calm confidence, his refusal to take anything in return. It wasn't just rare, it was unheard of in Weston's world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. The car rolled to a stop in front of a weathered building. The garage had clearly seen better days. Its faded sign hung crookedly, and the paint peeled like it hadn't been touched in decades. But there, crouched next to a beat-up bicycle with a wrench in hand, was Jaden. Richard stepped out of the car, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. "Jaden," he called, his voice carrying over the hum of the city in the background. Jaden looked up, squinting at the tall figure stepping toward him. For a moment he didn't recognize him, then it clicked. The man from the road, the fancy car, the flat tire. "Hey, mister," Jaden grinned, setting down the wrench and wiping his hands on his jeans. "You in trouble again?" Richard laughed, shaking his head. "Not this time. Actually, I came to thank you. You helped me out in a big way, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Jaden tilted his head, confused. "It was just a tire, mister. No big deal." Richard stepped closer, his expression serious but warm. "It was more than a tire, Jaden. It was the way you did it. No complaints, no expectations. Just helping someone because it was the right thing to do. That's rare." Jaden shrugged, his smile fading slightly. "Well, out here you learn to fix what you can and keep moving." Richard nodded, his eyes scanning the worn tools scattered around. He could see the resourcefulness in how the garage was set up, the organized chaos of someone who made do with what they had. "You've got talent, Jaden, real talent. and I want to help you take it further." Jaden froze, his brow furrowed. "Help me? How?" Richard smiled. "A few ways. First, I want to set up a scholarship for you, cover your schooling, all the way to college if that's what you want. Second, I'd like to help fix up this garage. It's clear it means a lot to you and your dad, and I'd like to see it running again." Jaden blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. "Wait, you're serious?" "Dead serious," Richard said, his tone firm. "And there's one more thing. When you're old enough, I want you to come work for me. You've got a knack for problem solving, and that's exactly the kind of mindset we need in my company." Jaden stared at him, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his hoodie. "Why would you do all that for me? I'm just some kid from around the block." "Because you're not just some kid," Richard replied. "You reminded me of something important, that doing the right thing doesn't always need a reason, and because I believe in paying it forward." Jaden's smile returned, wider this time. That's crazy. But thank you, mister. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Richard said, extending a hand. "Just promise me one thing. When it's your turn, you'll do the same for someone else." Jaden shook his hand, feeling a spark of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. The world might not always be fair, but maybe, just maybe, it had its moments. As Richard got back into his car, Jaden stood in the doorway of the garage, watching the sleek vehicle pull away. His life wasn't perfect, and he knew challenges would keep coming, but for the first time he felt like he wasn't alone in facing them. This wasn't just a reward, it was the start of something bigger. What would you do if you were in Jaden's place? Would you help a stranger without expecting anything in return, like he did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever experienced a similar situation where a small act of kindness changed everything? Let us know. Your voice matters. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and share it with your friends. Let's spread the message that even the smallest good deeds can make a big difference. This story was created to shine a light on important issues and inspire positive change in the world. Together we can make a difference. Your opinion truly matters.